We found faked MSC certificates. We found fake halal certificates. Any farmed seafood has to have a halal certificate because if you feed it pork, it's no longer halal. We found certain actors, and I won't mention names. Sometimes it's to no fault of their own. It's just internal. People selling you a product and then 6 months later changing the source. The most politically active group of people in any country in the world are fishermen. I ask you Brexit. When Brexit happened, and sorry to be political, fishermen threatened to throw fish in Scotland. I think it was Scottish fishermen threatened to throw fish on the doorsteps of Whitehall. Palate memory is one of those ones. Like if you can actually remember a dish, think about how many times you eat a day. If you can remember a dish, then you know somebody's done something well.
Welcome back to the Chef JKP Podcast. And on the show today, we have the honor of having the co-founder of Seafood Souq, Fahim Al Qasimi. Fahim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Right, so before we get on to the Seafood Souq and all of those sorts of things that we want to discuss, the first thing I'm going to smash you with is, what is your earliest food memory?
Oh, the earliest may be a tough one. I grew up between the United Arab Emirates and Germany. But I can tell you that throughout my life, I always think, food is the only thing that you experience with all five senses. And therefore, the memories come hard and fast. So I will shamelessly say, as a child in Germany, having Haribo gummy bears was definitely something that stuck. And you'll still find a pack of Haribo gummy bears in my backpack next to my laptop. And in all secret cupboards in my house.
Nice.
Even my kids will go to the supermarket and be like, got to pick up gummy bears for dad. So that's probably one of the earliest. There are some very specific German sweets that I remember. Mm-hmm. But I've always been into food my entire youth.
And then, so then what would you say then between your travels between Germany and UAE would be kind of your favorite food memory or food experience as a child?
As a child, I grew up fishing. I grew up on the ocean, and catch and cook is my thing. You've liked some of my catch and cook posts. Going out there and catching a fish that you've chosen to take out of the ocean and cooking it. I have a memory of me being 15 years old. Maybe no, I lie. I was 13, and I was fishing, and I caught a barracuda, which is not a great fish to eat. But because Fahim wanted to be a chef when he was a kid, I remember trying to gut it, failing, and thought that this had to be oven baked. So I had sliced up some lemon. I was 13. You have to picture a 13-year-old in his house, slicing up some lemon, putting a few olives on the inside, drizzling it with olive oil, putting it in the oven. Not a nice fish to eat, but
quite inventive though, for 13 and creative.
I've cooked all my life for many different reasons. I grew up with a single mum, so I had to do a lot of cooking by myself. You learn very early how to mistake spring onion for lemongrass.
Love that.
That one.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. So I've always just been in the kitchen, in and out of the kitchen, cooking.
So I'm interested in two things right now. Obviously Germany has a quite an extensive, let's say, food culture, very different, obviously because of the weather and the seasons. And then you've got the UAE here. That has another completely different, varied food culture. How was it growing up between the two? Because your palate must have been very honed in as a young kid between the two cultures.
I'd like to say it was it's nature versus nurture. I think it's a little bit nature. I have three brothers. Two of us are mad about food, and the other two didn't grow up the same way. I can now that you've asked me about Germany more, I can bring up those memories. I think the one thing growing up in Germany I remembered is we have a very large cherry tree in the middle of our house.
Oh, wow.
So fresh black cherries, for me, it's just a food memory. To be able to walk up to a tree, pick the fruit and eat it was something that was super special.
Amazing.
My grandmother in Germany did certain dishes that were very, very different to what we were eating in the UAE. You know, here at my grandmother's house in Sharjah, we were having, you know, saluna, which is a stew of chicken and potatoes and eggs on rice, very, you know, flavored with dried limes and all of our spices. And then in Germany, our favorite dishes as children, all my brothers will agree, is boiled potatoes that you mash with your fork. And then my grandmother makes a creamy spinach. So if you take frozen spinach, literally cook it up with a little bit of cream, but then you have a fried egg on top.
Oh, wow.
If I ever opened a restaurant, James, I will say I would fancify that and do almost like a potato gratin with then like wilted spinach leaves and then a poached egg on top, which is really, really sort of, that's what I would do.
But I think also the geography of Germany and potatoes itself, with the nature of the egg and all that sort of thing, because it would be very different, I think, if you were to serve that here and serve it in Germany.
Yeah, I think the common theme is really understanding where your food comes from. You know, we would drive past cornfields, picking raw corn in Germany off the, you know, sorry farmers that we stole your corn back then. But then here, you know, it was very much, you know, rice. We ate a lot of fish growing up. I remember a very important memory as a child was the old Sharjah fish market and going down with my father and walking past and choosing, you know, which fish and what my dad was asking. And back then there were these little barasti huts almost at the end, and you would walk over and pay, you know, an older Emirati woman, a few dirhams for her to scale and clean the fish. And, you know, they were just sitting under these literally barasti sheds doing it, and then taking that home for my dad to then fry up some prawns and have those with rice, or, you know, cook up some fish. He used to do a tuna curry as a child that I remember. But I mean, it's a nice way to start the podcast. Deep memories on.
Yeah, but
on
look,
food.
you're in a foodie podcast, and that's the one thing that really, for me, being half Venezuelan, and then growing up in England, I grew up in the southwest of England, so it's all foodie. So I'm a fish head. You know, I love anything and everything to do with fish. And when people ask me, well, what's your speciality? Then for me, it's really fish and seafood. And also, I think from a technical perspective, fish is far harder to do than meat. Meat, you can hot hold it at 57 degrees C, kind of medium rare, for 3 days. And it's going to stay like that. With a fish, you can't. It's very forgiving. So, but I love anything and everything to do with fish. So then you studied. Where did you study?
I was in the UK, actually. I was in Lancaster for my undergrad, and then I was at Cambridge for my postgrad.
So you were north of England?
Very much, yeah.
And then the south of England.
Yeah. If this is a fun podcast where I can be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, it were quality, and I had lots of chips and gravy. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun up there. Completely different food culture. I tell everybody that hasn't seen the north of England, go in the summer. You'll see some of the best
Beautiful
gastronomy, such different produce, such a different approach to food than a very Frenchified London, for example.
Yes, yeah.
And very hearty food, which I was used to from Germany. Maybe that's why it spoke to me. And then, yeah, I sort of learned a little bit there. Once again, as a student, you know, for those young people listening on the podcast, it's a time where necessity is the mother of invention. If you appreciate that you will be cooking for yourself, and I was very much into sports and I wanted to take care of my health, rather than doing the takeaways or the ready meals, the university was probably the longest time that I spent cooking for myself and really learning, you know, about new ingredients. Television was still a big thing. This is pre-YouTube. This is pre-Netflix, and therefore, you know, had the television on, whether it was ITV or BBC, and watching the cooking shows, going, I'm going to try that on the weekend. Then would go down to the local Sainsbury's, pick up the products, and then test it out on my friends. So for those young people listening, you will be a lot more time poor as you get older. So use that time to develop those skills as best you can.
And were you surprised about the sort of, because there's two things I think there is in England. You've got the quality of food, and then you've also got poor quality of food. But as a student, most students that I've met and encountered, they want fast meals. As in, what I'm talking about fast meals is that you cook it for yourself, but I'm talking like pasta, that sort of things. What were you sort of doing at that time?
So I was a bit more conscious. I challenge anybody that says ready meals and fast meals are cheaper. You can cook fantastic meals quickly, cheaper than a ready meal. The challenge that we face is that the supermarket industry is not set up for cooking for one, not even maybe cooking for two. I challenge any of the retailers here, as we've moved from, being able to choose what you want to convenience. Minced meat only comes in 500-gram packs. Right? You should be eating 100, maybe 180 to 150 to 200 grams for an individual portion. If you're bringing home half a kilo of minced beef, those are 3 meals that you need to prepare maybe in that day. And then you're worried about expiration date and so forth. It's why I learned a lot of how to treat vegetables, because they were still loose. I could pick up a leek. I could pick up 2 tomatoes if I wanted them. And then I learned how to cook with it that way. But my friends at university, I don't think you'll be hearing this, but if they are listening by any random chance, I do remember for 99p, there was a 500-gram pack of chicken wings.
Right.
You try to get your protein in. Chicken breast is obviously the most expensive. Chicken wings are a lot cheaper.
Right.
99p for chicken wings, and it was a big bunch of them. And I had a little spice rub that I'd made myself. It's not expensive to get some really good herbs and spices with a lot of salt. And I used to just bake those in the oven for 20 minutes. And they would come out crisp, and I would sit there and eat a bucket of chicken wings, basically.
But look, I think it's amazing. And also the fact that as a young child, you loved fishing and cooking and all that kind of stuff. So it sort of helps you be inventive. And also, I have to say, north of England is not an easy place to go to uni, number one. Number two, the weather's horrendous anyway. But it does sort of show you different types and extremely heavy food. Yes, especially in up there. So then after your studies, then you came back to the UAE?
I did, yeah. I came back to the UAE. I started my career in consulting, left there to work in investments, I'll say, is a very broad term. And then later became a representative of the Sharjah government, and then founded my own technology company with a friend of mine.
So then, how exactly was Seafood Souq born?
There's the official story and the unofficial story.
Let's have both, because they both sound amazing.
No, one is far more amazing. I'll tell you how it actually happened. A dear friend of mine is Remy Murray, who is the founder of Dibba Bay Oysters. And I was astounded by what he was building and saw if I could be part of it. Fate meant that I couldn't be. But drawing a parallel to knowing where your food comes from and picking cherries off a tree in Germany, to see local oysters being grown, being raised in super clear waters, and a product that I know some chefs don't like them as much as others, I think they're awesome. I think if you want to say what does a UAE oyster taste like, go to Fujairah or go to one of Remy's outlets and experience something new. And that for me was fascinating. But he had a challenge, which was he was really struggling to tell the story. I don't want to say there were good actors and bad actors, but in the distribution model that we have in food, sometimes you lose the connection to the original source. And people weren't really aware of how to source Remy's oysters, Dibba Bay oysters, and the quality that they were. And as we were sitting around the table that evening for dinner, there was a gentleman who was a friend of Remy's, not a friend of mine, called Sean Dennis. And Sean had spent his entire life in the technology world. And he sort of brushed off the comment and said, "Oh, you just need an e-commerce platform to trade seafood."
Just like whatever.
Off the cuff sort of comment.
Okay.
And yeah, we double-clicked on it. We dove deeper in the evening. Remy was convinced it would work for his business. And that was 5 years ago. And now we operate in 36 different markets with end-to-end traceability of seafood. We've traced probably 24 million plates equivalent of food. So Seafood Souq became this, we call it the future of the seafood industry today. It's the ability for wholesale buyers and sellers to trade and finance their seafood trades, but more specifically to the average consumer, and this is something I'm sure James will talk about quite a lot, gives the entire ecosystem the ability to trace seafood. And traceability means knowing where the product comes from, understanding who the producer is, what the supply chain looks like, and being able to tell the story of your seafood.
No, absolutely. So look, the thing that interested me also is when I was reading up about it and doing extensive research. Back in the UK, you have something called the MSc, and all the chefs are told about, marine sustainability, seafood, source responsibly, and they, from college, when you're doing your degree, they hammer you to make sure that you understand how important it is. Now, one thing I wasn't aware of within the seafood industry is that, or generally, you can buy a piece of fish that looks like a red snapper, but it's not a red snapper, and it says it is a red snapper. I was completely flabbergasted when I understood that happened, and I was really deeply shocked.
There's a lot worse than just red snapper.
Yeah.
1 in 5 pieces of seafood that we eat today is mislabeled.
Which is mental. This is crazy.
So we have to start at the beginning. And I appreciate the people listening to this are in the hospitality industry. I start most interviews, podcasts, when I'm on stage, asking a very simple question. Do you ask where your seafood comes from? Right? And I did this test in New York. We were at an investor conference, and there was sea bass being served at lunch. And this is a New York 5-star hotel. And I asked the audience afterwards when I was on stage, who here had the sea bass for lunch? And about 40% of the audience put their hand up. And I said, do you know where your sea bass, who asked where your sea bass came from? People sheepishly put their hands up, but I know nobody had actually asked. I did. And the waiter went off to ask the chef. And the chef came back and he said, it's from the Mediterranean. There's about 28 countries that border the Mediterranean.
Yes.
And there was a 55% chance that it came from Turkey. Turkey has roughly 55% of the global sea bass market. Greece, Cyprus, the others. You're a chef. You know where you source it from. Why do we treat seafood protein so differently to chicken and beef and others? And I think that for me was that's the real underlying challenge. We talked about it. You said fish is a very difficult protein to work with. It's delicate. It's also the most complex. The diversity of products within the seafood basket is huge by comparison to beef and chicken and others. The other thing as well, it's still the only product that we eat that we extract from the earth more like mining than farming. So 50% of the world's seafood is farmed, 50% we still extract from the oceans. And yet we're not asking where it comes from. We can ask the product itself, the type of growing practice, if it's farmed, where it was caught, if it was wild caught, let alone getting into the perishability of the product and then talking about date. That's the underlying issue to get us to the point where that's the reason when you sit in a restaurant and you say, hi, I'd love to order the salmon. Where's it from? In the future, or with our technology, it won't be it's Norwegian. It will be, this is from Norwegian fish farm X, grown in the city Y. This is their practices and this is what they do.
Wow. So let me just compute all of those things because it is quite complex, but I think it's also incredible.
Thank you.
Now, why isn't every restaurant that serves some type of fish product doing this?
So our hope is that they will, specifically in the Emirate of Dubai, where we've launched the first use case of trace for retail. So the original idea of traceability started at the production site. So we're in discussions with a number of fish farms, and we've done it already at source in Senegal, the Maldives, and Oman, where we have introduced traceability at source. So when it's caught off the boats and it lands, we can offer all the information at the point of landing, and then that is shared through the supply chain. After this podcast, I'll share with you a QR code that you can show, and that'll talk about hand line caught tuna, a story I'll tell later on, and how we brought, best practice to Omani fishermen, and they sell sushi grade tuna across the world now.
Unbelievable.
Right, through traceability.
In Oman, from Oman?
From Oman, yeah, near Mazira Island, on Mazira
Wow.
Island. So that's why. I am the first person to give credit to the hardworking team at Seafood Souq, because it's not just Sean and I. And a colleague of ours, Sophie, who's sort of the director of SFS Trace, this traceability product that we have, came up with this idea and said, let's take this to the hospitality industry. The hospitality industry operates that you have restaurants or outlets inside assets that are the hotels that are either owner operated or under a hotel management contract. And then they have their distributors, but the distributors speak to the chefs, not necessarily through centralized procurement. And then the distributors get their products from wherever they get them from. And Sophie said, our traceability platform, SFS Trace, Seafood Souq Trace, can offer an opportunity for chefs to really have more transparency on what they're sourcing. So we are so proud to have now been launched it with one, piloting it with a number of others, both here actually and in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for chefs to really understand where their seafood is coming from. And let's start there. It takes one email from the chef to all of their distributors to say, from now on, if you serve me seafood, I would like SFS Trace. I've been so thrilled at the distributors here. We have 37 onboarded, and they all completely appreciate it because they want to show that they're the best actors in their industry. They pay us a very small fee, the distributors, and they give us all of the information on the seafood provided to you. We double check the product. We double check the importation documents. We will check whether or not they have MSC certification. We will check, all of the requirements of the protocol that sits behind traceability. And we can give that restaurant, that hotel, an audit of the seafood for them to really understand what they're sourcing. That is already eye-opening for hotel brands. That's already eye-opening for restaurants. And we're very fortunate that that's slowly being rolled out across the Emirate of Dubai and now the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as well. If the chef then wants to say, well, I want the QR codes in my restaurant, yes, they have to pay a little bit extra. And then we can offer those QR codes and they're able to showcase it, even if they want branded with their restaurant logo on it, and really tell the story about their fish. It helps with training your front of house. It helps with holding your distributors to account. And I guess why it hasn't been done before, James, because I want to answer your question. One, this didn't exist. This is a UAE born and bred company that came up with an idea. Nobody else does what we do with SFS Trace. So it didn't exist. You didn't have the tools before. The other challenge is it's obviously very, very new. And therefore, it took a few very brave hotel brands with foresight to move first. Now we have the data to prove it. And I will say the horror stories, because this is not just about how well we're doing, but the challenges. We found faked MSC certificates. We found fake halal certificates. Any farmed seafood has to have a halal certificate because if you feed it pork, it's no longer halal. We found certain actors, and I won't mention names. Sometimes it's to no fault of their own. It's just internal. People selling you a product and then 6 months later changing the source. On contract, you wanted product A from this particular farm, and then halfway through the year, either they can't get hold of allocation, so they just, chop and change, put in another product. And I don't think it's the fault of the distributors, and I don't think there's any malintent in any of this, but there weren't the tools just to hold people to account. And SFS Trace does that.
So how has that changed the fishing industry so far?
On the wild catch side, it's extremely challenging. I think Sean and I will talk to you about our utopia, some of the things we're working on. We're working on building digital catch certificates for the fishing industry so that the government agencies here have the ability to register that catch. Because one of the biggest challenges we have in the world is something called IUU, illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. With SFS Trace at source, the UAE local fish markets, or, on the Red Sea in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, or where we've already built this in Oman, in Senegal, we can create a product that can now be sold B2B. Because if you're restaurant X working under hotel brand Y that has its sustainability targets, you would never buy fish that doesn't have a catch certificate. We're offering the opportunity for hotels to be able to finally locally source cherry and maybe not hamur, that's a bit overfished, but cherry and safi, rabbit fish that is a core part of our local diet. It's far more sustainable to eat. To give them production timelines, or at least understand when it's in season and out of season. Fascinating things that allow to create a completely different ecosystem around seafood.
So Seafood Souq is essentially, or is the number one global platform to find all traceable and sustainable fish? We're almost there. It sounds like
we're getting there,
you're on the way.
and we're getting there. I think we're thrilled. We operate, like I say, in about 36, 37 different markets across the world. It takes a very, very large cultural shift in the industry, and like I say, it's an extremely complex supply chain. And I'll walk you through it very quickly. Just if you're listening to this now and you're wondering, you're saying, well, I don't really understand it. If you buy beef, a cattle farmer will grow his cattle or her cattle in a particular farm. There will be a slaughter date that will then be most likely frozen, packed on site because the farm usually has a lot of land there. And then that would be put in a container or on a truck and sent to wherever it's going. Maybe one or two distributors in the middle.
Right.
When it comes to seafood, you have, in some cases, and I'll give you the most fragmented supply chain, and this is maybe the Oman story. You have fishermen on skiffs, what we call artisanal fishermen, that catch a very small amount of catch. And there are maybe 40 of them. And they go out on their boats and they catch their product, and they come in at different times of the day, and they have different landing points because there's no registered, collection area for that seafood. They don't ice the fish. They dump it on the side of the beach. Somebody comes in and buys that fish. It's been lying in the sun for a little bit of time, and they put it on the back of a pickup truck, and that pickup truck drives it to the closest production facility where they think they can probably sell that. By the time it gets there, it's been so degraded, it's only good for dog food. That then gets put in a can or in some sort of product, and then it's shipped, and then it eventually ends up where it is. In fish, there's filleting, there's production, there's breading, there's, all sorts of types of treatments that can happen. What we did in Oman was we worked with an organization called the IPNLF, the International Pole and Line Foundation, that taught these Omani fishermen, stop catching the fish in nets, because when you catch your tuna in nets, you kill about 100 turtles. The fish is lying there suffocating for 3 days. We can talk another time about how you should slaughter a fish and EKGME and the right way to bleed a fish. And they taught them how to catch these yellowfin tuna with literally a hand line. They pulled up that fish, they slaughtered it properly, EKGME, put it on ice on the boat, landed it at a collection center directly. There it was iced and tested and frozen. And now they went from selling dog food to sashimi grade yellow tuna, and SFS Trace was the opportunity to show that in the supply chain. So they doubled their money with catching less fish.
Unbelievable.
And that's really what it is. When you start asking the story, when you can prove of where this product comes from, you create so much impact, which is really what Seafood Souq is about.
So then, you're involved with the government, and when you go around traveling, talking about Seafood Souq, how have leaders of countries taken this on board of trade, of what you're doing, and that specific platform, Seafood Souq? How have they taken to it? Because some will say, well, no, we don't want to do it. Some say, well, why should we? Some may be like, wow, this is an incredible idea. How has it actually been taken on board by different people?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a need for it. If you ask any fisherman, are you catching more fish or less fish than last year? They will all tell you, definitely less. We can all agree that we are overfishing our oceans. The data proves it. It's not going to change unless we introduce new technology. The challenge you face, the most politically active group of people in any country in the world are fishermen. I ask you Brexit. When Brexit happened, and sorry to be political, fishermen threatened to throw fish in Scotland. I think it was Scottish fishermen threatened to throw fish on the doorsteps of Whitehall. Fishing is a very small part of the wider debate that happened around that event between Europe and the UK. And yet the political activism of fishermen is extremely high. So I appreciate that policymakers do want to implement it, but fishermen are the first to say, this is our national right. We've been doing this for centuries. Please don't change the way we do things. What we found with the test cases is sometimes you just need to implement some small changes, show that you can win them with their wallets, pay them more for their fish if it has traceability. And then you slowly start driving change.
It's massive, though. I think as you quite rightly, and thinking about it on a deeper level, it's really strange how generally we don't treat shellfish, seafood, the same way you would with proteins, with meat, with chicken, lamb, all that kind of stuff. It's really strange, and considering there's so much and it's so varied, and I find it quite scary because everybody, especially within hospitality, talk about terroir, and where is it from and all that kind of stuff. But people they don't really seem to care, which is a shame.
I think they used to. I mean, you and I are roughly the same age. I think I'm a bit older. Fish counters, fishmongers. They used to be the storytellers of the seafood product you were buying, and we had I think a transition period where, it's sort of, if you go into your local supermarkets here in the UAE or around the world, you have this combination of some packaged seafood and a very small fish counter. And it's intimidating, let's be honest. There's eyes and there's teeth and there's gills. And, it's not like a nice little packet with a picture of a cow and a green field.
And a pink pony.
And a pink pony. You're going, oh, this is a wonderful steak. It's a ribeye. It's grass-fed. Okay, I'm going to buy this, right? My wife is from New Zealand, so I need to always push kiwi lamb and kiwi beef. So, that it's easy. It's convenient.
Right.
Fish counters, I still go to the fish market. I have Mohammed down at an Egyptian guy at the Sakim fish market. I only buy my fish from him. But I'm also very knowledgeable. So when somebody tries to sell me green lip mussels as being local, I know they come from Pakistani waters. I know, the little nuances of the seafood industry that happen, right? Today, we are seeing the biggest tectonic shift in the way seafood is being sold in retail. And that's for two reasons. Number one, packaging technology has gotten better. You can now vacuum seal fillets of seafood products. One of the best ones, I'm allowed to mention some great distributors here. Wetfish did it with salmon fillets. 100 to 200 gram fillets of salmon, vacuum sealed with their logo on it. That is very convenient when you're in store. It actually produces less waste. So supermarkets are more incentivized to sell vacuum sealed portioned seafood. Right. It's fresh. It's not frozen. The second thing that happened was COVID and convenience. I'd love to see the data. I don't have it. I'd love to see how much less fish was sold throughout COVID because you couldn't order it online. Very few people will say, okay, well, yeah, I trust the person packing it that they're going to pick the exact fish and the freshness that I wanted. I ate less fish. Okay, I've lied for the first time on the podcast. I went spearfishing throughout COVID and I still ate.
There's photos everywhere.
Yeah, there's photos everywhere. I spearfish. I'm not ashamed to say it. It's the most selective form of fishing, and you only catch mature fish if you know when they're in season. And I then know exactly where my seafood comes from. So, but I'm sure that there was a reduction in seafood consumption throughout COVID. So because of that, if we fast forward 5 years from now, more and more seafood will be vacuum sealed, portioned, and sold on shelves rather than fish counters. That is a huge opportunity for seafood producers to put on SFS Trace QR codes. And here's this big news. We've done it. We've done it in Europe before we did it here. We had Bangladeshi tiger prawns being sold in Europe, frozen ones there, with our QR code on it. UAE technology in supermarket shelves in France, in Italy, in Spain, where you could click on it and it would tell you where it came from, the day it was harvested, will give you the name of the ship it was on and when it landed. And it tells producers that they can start telling their story. We've made documentaries. They're on our YouTube channel at Seafood Souq when you're on YouTube, where you'll see it. It'll tell you the story of exactly where these things are produced. There's a great one on Oman on our YouTube channel. Go click, learn about it. If people don't know that prawns are not harvested out of the ocean, but they're grown in really clear waters in these fields in Bangladesh, go look. I think it's the city of Pune. There's a $1 billion prawn industry there.
But now, as I'm talking to you, why is it so? What does it mean to you on a personal level? What you're doing right now, because it's making a global difference.
No, I'll tell you now, and I find it very difficult to talk about hard work and struggle to chefs listening, because I have friends that are chefs. I've worked a little bit in kitchens with them, and I commend you on standing for as long as you do, putting all that effort into making a dish for somebody to say, well,
That was all right.
I don't like the temperature. Can you cook it a bit more? No, but it's tough. But as entrepreneurs, Sean and I have had tearful nights. I'll fully admit it. We haven't had it easy all the time. Why did we keep going? And the reason we keep going is we really believe in what we're doing. Sean and I spend most weekends when we can together in the water, on a friend's boat or free diving or, surfing or sailing. And those that know me outside of Seafood Souq and my work, I spend my personal time working on turtle rehabilitation. So, the oceans they say cover the 70% of the surface area of the earth, but from a volume perspective, it's about 98% or something silly like that of the earth. And yet we don't ask where our seafood comes from. We don't treat seafood the same way. We use it as our rubbish bin. I think that, maybe this is really me getting personal and maybe getting a little bit dicey in terms of my opinions, but, before we invest so much in space, let's invest more in our oceans. We haven't figured it out here on Earth yet. I say that cautiously because I fully appreciate satellite technology has helped our oceans a lot. We do need to invest in space, but I'd like to invest in the oceans just as much.
No, that's an amazing point. There's so much. It's not just about the food; it's about everything else. It's far more than I do when it comes to that subject, but it is really important. It's scary, and as you mentioned earlier, when fishermen are saying, "Well, we're fishing less, we're fishing less, we're fishing less," species are going to go extinct if we're not careful.
Yeah, I think I will say, you're very complimentary. I didn't know all of this 5 years ago. I think the most fun thing about being an entrepreneur is how much you learn in the process. I think you really become hungry and thirsty for so much more knowledge. I started this business with Sean. We had a hypothesis. We had some assumptions. Now, when Sean and I are out and we're talking in Latin names about certain seafood species, we found a case where using SFS Trace, we highlighted somebody was serving an endangered species. They had no idea. It wasn't their fault. I go into restaurants. I was in a restaurant which won't be named the other day, and they had a little seafood counter for their sort of weekend seafood brunch. And I said, "Where's that from?" "Oh, I need to check with the chef." "Where's this from?" "I think it is." I said, "Guys, I'll make your life easier. Put our QR codes on your counters, and you'll never have to answer a question again." And the fascinating part for us is finding out who actually scans the QR codes. We did a test, and don't hold me to these numbers. Osama, our fascinating and fabulous chief technology officer, will tell you this better. But we launched it at Gulf Food last year, I think it was. And people spent on average something like 1 minute, 40 seconds. That's a long time to spend scanning through a webpage. Looking at a trace code, understanding what this technology can do. People are interested. We just have to give them the tools to be able to look more.
And then from a global perspective, I'm talking about restaurants and chefs. I used to be obsessed with the Tokyo fish market and the Sydney fish market and then London. But now, when you come to the fish markets in Dubai and the projects which are happening in Sharjah, they're big. I mean, they are on a global stage. We've got Michelin here. We've got Gomelo, 50 Best, and big chefs. Chefs who have been around for 40 years with restaurants throughout the world are coming to us. Do you think we will compare? Do you think we're up there already?
It's very difficult. We live on the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. From a production side, our fish market cannot compete with Busan, Tokyo, Fulton Fish Market in New York. It's a very, very different size of the market. I'll reword your question. If I was, I'm not going to name a celebrity chef because it'll show who I'm a big fan of. But if you were a chef and you're all of a sudden going to tell a different story in your restaurant, right? Are you going to be the chef that opens a restaurant in the UAE that says, "Here is Dover sole, with a beurre blanc on a bed of, Savoy cabbage, and I don't know, russet potato gratin or something like that"? It's a great dish for London.
Yeah, for London.
For London, what story are you going to tell here? And my one is always, could you do? There's something a lot of people don't know, but if you go to the supermarkets or you go to the fish markets, we have a local clam here. It's just a normal white clam, and it's lovely. And people have cooked it and said, "Oh, it doesn't taste the same." Put them in some fresh water. They're filter feeders, so they'll, some of these haven't been cleaned since they've been out the ocean. Put them in some fresh water. Put them in the fridge for a couple of hours. They, let them clean them out. And then what I do is I roast them on the barbecue. I literally just put them on the open fire until they open up. And then I get a local lime that's grown in season on the East Coast, and I squeeze that on. Very simple dish, James.
But incredible. I'm sure it's amazing.
It's just got a story. It's just got a story. All right. And this is what I'm talking about, is about telling the story. If you're going to be a local chef that wants to create a fascinating, menu using local products, you're going to have to get comfortable working with shari as a fish. We have a gorgeous red snapper. Right, the red snapper here is to die for. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite fish. We call it hamra. Finding out ways to do that is going to be the chef that tells the better story.
So then, what are the ambitions for Seafood Souq? Where do you see it 5, 10, 15 years from now?
My ambition, and Sean and I agree. Or I think where we came together on this, we have this joint passion for the impact. I co-founded it with Sean. He's the CEO. Unofficially, I'm the CIO, the Chief Impact Officer of the business. I think we both share, and remember, we didn't know each other 5 years ago. We've become best friends through this venture. But the common values that we had is we both love the ocean. We're both probably going to retire on the ocean. Me in a sailboat, him somewhere on the coast. But my personal ambition is something that existed in the F&B industry, I'll say comfortably 10 years ago, and has changed, and I hope will now change in the technology industry. I've said this on stage. This is once again Fahim being very honest, to the point where I may get reprimanded. But we have an inferiority complex. You and I connected on Instagram talking, when I posted saying, I've always wanted to open my own restaurant. I don't think I ever will, just because I'm time poor and I'm not that skilled. But 10 years ago, when I said I wanted to open my own restaurant, people said, no, why would they back a local Emirati chef? Right? We can bring great concepts from abroad.
What?
Yeah, this is 10, 15 years ago. It was a different time. And we saw this influx of international franchises.
Small-minded.
No, it's not. I mean, it was just the nature of where it was. Today, it's the complete inverse. The UAE is giving priority to local concepts because we want to push it, and we realize we should have our own voice on F&B. I've created certain dishes that are quite Emirati in their. Yes, they're fusion, but they're quite Emirati in their approach.
But what's wrong with fusion?
Okay, we know. I think for me, I'm a fusion, you're a fusion. I think the fusion, my challenge is that restaurants and the F&B industry and the way it works today is you have to have a plated piece of food that works. Service à la Russe, the idea of having plated food was introduced by the Russians into mainland or Central Europe and Western Europe. I don't know exactly which century. That's some food history for you. Before that, feasts were served where food was set in the middle and it was very much sharing. Emirati food is wholesome. Emirati food, when people ask me, where do you take your friends for Emirati food? I tell them I go pick it up from my grandma's house and I bring it back to mine if they really want to eat an Emirati dish. What we need to do to have Emirati concepts happen, the fusion needs to be there because you need to change the way in which you just approach to plating and commercializing. Because let's be honest, it's also about commercializing it.
Yeah.
You need to be able to commercialize it. I have some ideas. I've created some dishes. Everybody knows who I've opened restaurants with. Paul Frangi and I have sat in my kitchen many times going through menu ideas and dish ideas, sometimes by mistake, sometimes, together, and very intentionally. But my passion is really to prove that we can come up with something new and great from the region for the world. That's what Seafood Souq is all about. That's where, when it comes to food, I try to think. I have a concept that I want to do, and I want it to be so Emirati and so unique that it's created such a big shift that people would, look at it in New York, in London, in Singapore, in Frankfurt, the exact same way. I think if I can do that as a parent of two young boys, then when they say, Dad, I want to do this, at least I've set the example to say, you can do anything you want. Just put your mind to it.
So look, I'm going to go off topic a little bit now because you reminded me of something which I'm very passionate about. So I arrived in the Middle East 2012, fresh out of London. I was a psychotic chef out of psychotic London kitchens. I had no idea about the culture here, but I was tasked with doing a tasting menu for a fine dining restaurant in a very prominent resort in Oman, which is still very dear. And that restaurant is a beautiful setting. The resort looks over the sea. And so my job was to tell a story, and it was only tasting menu. So you had 7 courses or 12 courses as a guest. And my job was to tell the story of the region within tasting menus. So I went out and I was like, I want to know the local fish, the local history, as much as I possibly could to make those tasting menus reflect the country that I was in. So when it came to the local Emiratis that came to that restaurant, there was a lot of backlash. They didn't get it because it was Arabic fusion fine dining. However, the Europeans and the people that came over who didn't know anything about it loved it because they wanted to taste the local foods. Now, fast forward 10 years, I had a conversation with a very prominent chef who said, if you look at the Spanish, the French, the Brits, the Japanese, they all have their base food, but they also have their molecular or their high-end food, which is all about their culture. And I said, why are we not doing that here? There is absolutely no reason as to why you couldn't do it. You take those flavors and that essence of grandma, and then you put it into that bite. And I feel that we have the skills in this country. Because I'm very passionate about the UAE. I feel that we have the skills here and the knowledge, and for a few of us to get together and say, look, how can we really elevate it? Because wouldn't it be amazing to have a Michelin-starred UAE-based restaurant from Emirati food?
It takes you're tugging at my heartstrings here. This is something that I think is something I'm very passionate about, and anybody that's eaten at my house will know this. I think I started that journey of trying to understand it more by doing certain things. It started with sourcing. So my first idea around it was, why do we need to import everything? It's a great restaurant I go to in Singapore called Gunther's. Very fine dining, very elevated, but they fully admit that they get the best products they get that day. The maître d' walks out with a tray at the start of the evening and says, how many courses would you like? These are the best products we could get hold today, which puts a lot of pressure on Gunther as a chef to create dishes basically on the fly with a very small set of particular dishes on his menu. The best one is cold angel hair pasta with truffle and caviar. Just saying. Timeless.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, bring your credit card. But I started there, and nobody's going to copy this, so I'm just going to walk you through the concept of oceans, which was this idea that I had. And I said, look, what if we limited what we could import? Your oils, your salts, your peppers, your spices. But spices have been traded here for donkeys, right. So it's not something new to use an imported product in the UAE, right? But it had to be nearshoring, so the spices we would get from India and so forth. And then you'd start walking through what are the products you could actually work with, right? So to take our local prawns and do a prawn majboos, right? Or when I caught a very big fish once, and I promised my grandma I would take it to her. So we went over, and you cook down this fish with the dried limes and the cloves and the saffron and the spices. And you create this broth that is so much umami, so much depth, almost like a dashi sort of based, right, broth. But then you cook the rice in that broth. There is elegance there. There's complexity, there's depth. And there's no imported products other than the rice, obviously. But this was really using stuff that we've used for forever. And that's where the journey started. And I started to create these dishes around that, the clams that I mentioned earlier, which is like, well, what if we could take the local limes and the clams, even though that maybe they didn't eat them like they did before. We have a form of blue crab. You could make a beautiful blue crab-based dish, maybe elevate it, maybe create some fusion and bring some of those flavors to it. Fantastic. Where it then went to was understanding, and this is my fault. I was raised by a German mother and I'd spent a lot of time abroad. I didn't understand the food history of the UAE and the complexity that exists with food, right? So when I went down the seafood route, because I love seafood and I spent time in the ocean, everybody would say, actually, I'll tell you this exact story. I was at a conference in Europe and the government had a stand and I was starving. And one of the Emirati guys said, oh, come backstage, there's sihna. And I said, what's sihna? I didn't grow up eating it. It's basically powdered sardines with onions and spices that we would put on rice with some few fresh chopped tomatoes and a little bit of ghee and eat that. You can buy it in the fish markets.
Sounds amazing.
It's amazing. So what could you do with sihna, for example? Then I spoke to my buddies at the East Coast, because we grew up bananas on the East Coast, where there's a tradition of actually, like a hangi in New Zealand, wrapping meat in banana leaves with raf leaves inside. I think they put raf leaves or certain other leaves to create some smoked flavor on it. And they bury it on coals like many cultures around the world.
So shua, essentially.
Yeah. But specifically in the banana leaves, because that only exists in Fujairah and Kelba and Khorfakan on the East Coast. So why we haven't got there yet? It's because it's going to take somebody with a lot of time to do the research and to ask the questions and to be brave and try and probably make a few rubbish dishes along the way.
But you need to make the rubbish dishes to then make the exceptional ones.
Yep.
All the chefs have made rubbish dishes. I'm telling you, everyone. But, Gordon Ramsay has made rubbish dishes. He even says it all the time. But look at him. So now, look, we've come to our foodie quick fire questions. First of all, you spent a lot of time traveling around the globe.
Yep.
So you don't need to name names. But I want you to go into your mind and tell me the funniest or the weirdest ever restaurant experience that you've ever had.
The weirdest restaurant experience
Don't say somewhere in New Zealand.
No, it wasn't there. I've had a lot of crazy restaurant experiences. The weirdest one, I will say this. I've had a few weird ones. I really appreciate good food. And I really appreciate taking my time to really understand what the chef's intentions were in a dish. So I have many weird experiences because I sit in Michelin star restaurants by myself when I travel. And I will go and I will book a table for one and I will sit down and I'll enjoy it. And the first time I ever learned how to do that, I was in Italy, in Fiesole, just outside of Florence, at one of the best hotels I've ever stayed in. And I was alone. And I walked into the restaurant and there was a chef's menu. And it was 80 euros, I think it was. So I said, I'll have the chef's menu. And it's November and I know it's truffle season. So please ask the chef to make truffles. I was then served 13 courses, each with shaved black truffle on it. I think they thought I was a critic. So that's probably the funniest and weirdest experience I've had. And since then, I've continued to eat out alone and not be ashamed of it. I really enjoy the experience.
No, I think it's therapeutic in a way.
It's quite nice.
And you get a lot of attention, especially if you're on your own. So then, from all of the meals you've had, Michelin starred or not Michelin starred, what would you say has been the one meal that has almost changed your life? And I'll give you the segment. So you know the film Ratatouille?
Yep.
When the critic has the ratatouille and exports him back to his childhood. What's the meal that always... I call it the meal of a lifetime.
Meal of a lifetime. So hard. I'm so fortunate. I've eaten at so many phenomenal restaurants. I think... and to think about this palate memory that I can walk you through individual dishes. In that restaurant in Fiesole, I had a potato puree with black truffle and a poached egg. that I think I'll never forget. I've had Pierre Gagné, when he was in town here in Dubai, cook me a dish with prawns and grapefruit that just completely blew my mind.
Wow.
I've had who have I had? Yannick Alino. I've been very honored to have Yannick cook a private dinner once where he poached foie gras that I thought was just heaven on a plate. But I can equally tell you that Gunther's, cold angel hair pasta with truffle and caviar is one that completely sticks out. I've been to a restaurant in Sweden called Gastrologique, where it was literally, the dish was called, I think, vegetables from the garden. And it was just wrapped in a little bit of cucumber with a tiny sauce that just elevated vegetables to a level I never thought they could taste like that.
Wow.
I've also had a bowl of noodles and some sort of meat in Medewi in Bali from a street vendor just before I went surfing. And the amount of umami and sustenance in that probably 50-cent, $1 bowl of noodles.
Amazing.
That completely just took my breath away. Having, I don't know, egg hoppers in Sri Lanka before going out for a surf, or string hoppers and curry sauce there. So I've had the range. I don't want the listeners to just think that I just stroll into and have Michelin-starred chefs cook for me all the time.
That's what I mean. But you can have an amazing meal on a street vendor.
Yeah, but I think what palate memory is one of those ones. Like if you can actually remember a dish, think about how many times you eat a day. But if you can remember a dish, then you know somebody's done something well. From that street stall in Medewi in Bali, all the way to Yannick Alino cooking me a poached foie gras. And I think just stopping, looking, and appreciating the complexity of the dish. Like that street vendor put love and effort into making that bowl of noodles with, it was like a dumpling made with some sort of meat. I don't know if it was chicken or beef, but there was a lot of bread and flour in it. It was fun. It was good.
Really?
It was good.
So then pushing you again, it could be from your uni days to now.
Mm-hmm.
Who would you say are your top 3 culinary heroes? And they don't need to be celebrities.
No, sure. Completely, I mean, first and foremost, my grandmas, both of them. I'll lump them into one if I can use that to get a fourth in there. Both my grandmas. My grandma in Germany bought me my first cookbook when I was 8. And she cooked a lot with me, and I think that was super important. And my Emirati grandma, because her language of love was feeding us, and it was very much spending time and cooking. Culinary heroes, I'll say the second, Reminisces, Gary Rhodes was a huge influence on me as a kid, and getting watching him on TV, elevating I'd studied in the UK, right? So it was, British food was super great. I had the honor of meeting him before he passed, and he, I don't even think he knows this, but he made such an impression on a young Emirati kid that just wanted to wear the chef's jacket and kind of do it. And for him, I still have all his books, and he has one book called Keeping It Simple, I think, that I still use as a reference book, and that for me is super important. And then the last one, I think, if he allows me to mention his name, Gregory Khalouf, who was at the time when I met him working for Atelier du Chef, which was the first sort of franchised cooking school out here many years ago when I was in my early 20s. And I spent a lot of time with him, and he really just honed my skills and taught me how to make things that I didn't know how to make, and helped me understand something that I'll give chefs a lot of credit for. Désolé mon ami. I know Greg never finished, went to university. He was a chef his whole life. But when I sort of asked him, as somebody that, went through schooling and all the rest of it, and I asked Greg, I said, why do you take, things like beans and things and throw them in ice water specifically after you boil them? And he was explaining to me that if you don't shock them that way, then the chlorophyll, the cell walls break and the chlorophyll seeps out. And that's why, it goes from being a bright green into this brown. You chefs have a deep understanding of biology and chemistry and physics that nobody gives you credit for. Maybe you didn't read it in a textbook, But anybody striving to become a chef or is a chef or understands how to work with a protein, you have a deep understanding of science, probably better than some scientists do. And I think that for me, if there's one message I can say, thank you for your commitment to science, because it makes the food taste better. In school, it was called food science.
It's true.
Why have we forgotten that? Sorry, I've gotten really passionate.
It's true, you're right. What would be your biggest piece of advice for chefs or restaurateurs who, want to look after the oceans?
Oh, who want to look after the oceans? Ask where your seafood comes from and use SFS trace. Boom. Simple as.
And what would be your biggest piece of advice for, if you could go back in time, 16-year-old Fahim?
16-year-old Fahim. What would I tell myself? A really tough question. Actually, no, I learned this from a life coach. You're going to be okay. Worry less.
That's the big one, huh? Worry less. Mm-hmm. Fahim, look, it's been an amazing conversation. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to be here.
Not at all. Pleasure.
It's been fascinating to learn about yourself, about Seafood Souq. I think it's going to be game-changing for everyone on the planet, really. And I really cannot wait to see the Emirati fusion restaurant that you're going to be opening.
Hopefully one day. James, thank you so much. It's pleasure's been mine. And thanks to everybody listening for taking time out of your day to hear me drone on about the things I care about.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.